Hi, everyone. I'm here today to talk about shifts, because shift happens. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's some momentous shifts underway. Personal shifts, group shifts, societal shifts, and even global shifts. I'm going to begin by sharing with you a personal story of one of my own shifts. When I was just finishing my master's degree in English literature at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, one of the foremost universities in Israel, I thought I knew everything. I could quote Shakespeare, and I could deconstruct a 19th century novel, and I could discuss postmodernism and post-structuralist theory, but I needed a job. So I went to work for a high-tech company, an engineering company actually, that designed and constructed clean rooms for high-tech companies. I looked at the plans and the work that the engineers were doing, and I realized that even if I studied for another 100 years or got another 3 master's degrees, I could never do that. I could never hope to understand or construct that clean room. And I realized there are many types of intelligence in the world, and mine is only one. That, for me, was a moment of shift. It may not seem so earth-shaking, but it changed me. I gained humility. Shifts can be humbling. A shift is different from just a moment of insight or a moment of awareness, because we all have those almost daily. But a shift is when you change how you perceive the other, and it's a dawning realization that all the assumptions you previously held may be limiting you and preventing you from seeing the whole picture. Shift is an expansion in self-understanding, and it's a redefinition of your identity. It's an ability to accept another person's story alongside your own. My next story is a shift which occurred when I moved to Cleveland in 2001 from Israel. I began my PhD at Case Western Reserve University, and I discovered that Cleveland was home to the second largest Palestinian community in the country. This is second to Detroit. And in Israel, ironically, I had rarely ever had a chance to meet Arabs. So I saw it as an opportunity to begin an Arab-Jewish dialogue group on campus. My original plan had been to get together and persuade others to see things my way, my liberal peace now kind of way. I started out using words like us and them. I will tell them and they will see me. But soon I stopped seeing it that way. In the group, we began to accept each other simply as human beings. The group began to create its own we. And that we had nothing to do with our ethnic backgrounds and nothing to do with our tribes or our religious affiliations. The we became the group, and this was unexpected to me. We all have deeply held convictions, and this is a quote from David Bohm, who's a physicist and a dialogue scholar. He says, "Our deeply held convictions are like computer programs in our minds." And dialogue brings people together. It doesn't require that people necessarily agree with one another, but in dialogue, you're allowing the whole that already exists to manifest. And dialogue creates shift, a deep shift away from the notion that the parts are primary and towards an understanding of wholeness. In my dialogue group, we created connections where before there was separation. We shifted from fear to curiosity, to courage. Shift has been called a positive, qualitative change in the relationship between groups, and it includes cognitive change and affective change. So it's about how you think and also how you feel. Shift is the capacity to expand your worldview so that you can appreciate different perspectives and hold multiple viewpoints simultaneously. So what you're doing is you're expanding your awareness to encompass more possibilities. That's the essence of shift. So shifts can expand us. They are expansive. The third shift I'm going to be talking about today is an economic shift. And this shift is one that hasn't happened yet. It's a shift in progress, a shift that we're only beginning to see. I would say we're only at the outset of this shift. My students at Ursuline College and at the other universities where I've taught often begin my classes with the deeply held, though seldom examined, conviction that capitalism is the only economic system that can work. They feel that free markets are the best we can do because we are all motivated by self-interest and by greed. But where did we learn these lessons? Where did we learn this mindset? And can we shift away from it? For over a century, we've been immersed in an industrial age paradigm which emphasized growth, profit, and expansion, and which allowed for extreme unequal distribution of income wealth and the degradation of our planet and our natural resources. For over a century, we've been immersed in this way of doing business. So the shift I'm talking about is going to move us away from that way of thinking. In the shift that I'm seeing, we cease to see the worker as merely a cog in a wheel of a machine, and we begin to see him or her as a whole person. The new economics that I'm talking about privileges the community and the local above the global. We're so used to thinking globalization is where we're going, but this is a return to localization. The shift is to a new caring and concern over the planet and conservation of our natural resources. And it's a shift to making economic decisions based on the needs and requirements of future generations, a long-term orientation rather than the short-term orientation that emphasizes merely the bottom line. And I know a lot of you probably right now are thinking to yourselves that I'm dreaming, that we're still far away from this kind of utopian society. And I agree with you. We are still far away from this economic shift. But if this kind of dream resonates with you, and if somewhere deep in your hearts you'd like to see this happen, that's already an indication that this shift is beginning. It's happening at the grassroots. We're beginning to see the first green shoots of it appearing. Discussions are now being held about the caring economy, the sharing economy, the gift economy, resource-based economics. I'm throwing out a lot of ideas, but these are the discussions that are being held today in many circles. Universal basic income, which takes care of the weak and underprivileged, local and alternative currencies. These ideas are circulating. We are and we need to be shifting from an economy of growth to an economics of degrowth. And when you first hear a call for degrowth, you might think I'm talking about hardship and deprivation, going back to the Stone Age, or that I'm against progress. But no, that's not what I mean, not what I mean at all. Shifting to degrowth would liberate us from the burden of pursuing material excess, because that's what we're almost always doing. We simply don't need so much stuff, and certainly not when it comes at the expense of our planetary health and social justice and also personal well-being. Shifting away from consumerism that degrades nature and doesn't satisfy the universal human craving for purpose and meaning. We want an economy that delivers democratic rather than plutocratic outcomes, and this is possible. I'm here to tell you it's possible. Thomas Kuhn reminds us that our paradigms of reality are socially constructed and not absolute. The vision of society that causes suffering and separation is not final, not binding. We can democratize the economy and systems can be transformed. One of the voices calling for this shift is that of economics and social theorist Jeremy Rifkin. Jeremy Rifkin's vision of a post-capitalist future is one based on sharing and access rather than ownership and competition. One in which social capital replaces financial capital. And the marketplace becomes a collaborative commons in which goods and services are circulated at little cost. These ideas, like I said, are out there. They're being discussed, and shift will happen when more people are aware and more people are educated. So just by being here and sharing these ideas together, we all become part of that shift. My students are part of that shift. And at Ursuline, we are transitioning to an MBA, a business department, a business school that dares to discuss degrowth. Shifts can be triggered by crises, by suffering, and by loss. Our economic shift is being triggered by just such crises. So shift is about loss and rebirth. The fourth and final shift I'm going to be discussing is a global shift in consciousness. It's related to the economic shift I was just talking about. Perhaps the global shift in consciousness is the only way that economic shift will actually occur. But the shift I'm talking about now is a fundamental shift of the mind. We have very deep mental models of how the world works, deeper than we even know. To think that the world can ever change without changes in these mental models, well, that's foolish. It's about a shift from seeing a world made up of things to seeing a world that's open and primarily made up of relationships. And that is at the heart of all the shifts I've been talking about here today. Relationship as the organizing principle of life. Systems theorist Peter Senge says we're resigned to believing we can't have any influence in the world, at least not on a scale that matters. So we focus on the small scale. We focus on doing the best we can with our kids. We work on our relationships. We focus on building a career. Yet if we have a world of people who feel powerless, then we have a future that's predetermined. And then we live in hopelessness and helplessness, in a state of despair. But we don't need to remain in that place of despair. To quote David Bohm once again, small changes at just the right place can have a system-wide impact because these changes share the unbroken wholeness that unite the entire system. A seemingly insignificant act at one part creates results that emerge far away. Unseen connections create effects at a distance in places quite surprising to us. So what we do matters, and our efforts on that small scale that I'm talking about with our children, our families, our workplaces, and our careers, these matter. I'm here to tell you that everything you do matters. When you join your voice with others and demand change in action and shift, it will happen. Thinker and scholar Charles Eisenstein says that we are creating a new story of the people, a story of interbeing, a story of reunion rather than one of separation. We are all interdependent. The more we act from a place where we know that what we do matters, that people and planet and humanity and nature are all interconnected, that we are parts of the whole, the better we are able to create that more beautiful world. Charles Eisenstein calls it the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. So as I said, shift is about interconnection, intervening, reminding us of the web that links us all. Jim Jaworski says, if you reach deeply into yourself, you are reaching into the very essence of mankind. When you do this, you will be led into the generating depth of consciousness that is common to the whole of mankind. We are all connected. If this could be taught and people could understand it, we would have a shift in consciousness. Shift is about wholeness. So I've discussed personal shifts, group shifts, societal shifts, and global shifts. Shifts are about humility, as I said, expansion, loss and rebirth, and about creating wholeness. They are all interconnected. So how is this going to happen? The shift to the more beautiful world will occur when the micro, meso, macro, and meta levels of society all meet. And what do I mean by that? The micro level of society is those person-to-person interactions that you have, those meetings with your neighbor, with your family. When you treat others with respect, when all meeting becomes a meeting of I, thou, as Martin Buber calls it, you think it has no significance, but it does. The meso level is the group level. When you get together with friends or in your workplace, in your schools, in your universities, when you volunteer, when you're in civil society organizations and you become an activist in whatever cause is the cause that draws you, that's important to you, that's shift taking place on the meso level. The macro level is the government, diplomacy. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to choose our elected leaders wisely. They impact the shift as well. And finally, there's the meta level. That's the cultural stories we tell. When we tell a story that gives hope, that empowers, that doesn't leave us in that place of hopelessness and despair that I was talking about earlier. When we tell a story that makes us believe we can repair the world, that's shift occurring on the meta level. And that's what we're doing here today. We're shifting the cultural story to allow that global shift in consciousness to occur. So I'll end with just such a hopeful story. This was told by Jim Jaworski of the American Leadership Forum. "Tell me the weight of a snowflake," a sparrow asked a wild dove. "Nothing more than nothing," was the answer. "In that case," the sparrow said, "I must tell a marvelous story. I sat on a branch of a fir tree, close to its trunk, and it began to snow. Not heavily, not a giant blizzard, just like in a dream, without any violence. Since I didn't have anything better to do, I counted the snowflakes that were settling on the twigs, and their number was exactly 3,741,952. When the next snowflake dropped onto the branch, nothing more than nothing, as you say, the branch broke off. Having said that, the sparrow flew away, and the dove thought about the story for a while and finally said to herself, perhaps there is only one voice lacking for that more beautiful world to emerge, and perhaps that voice is yours."